Engine off, hands on the wheel. Now.
Officer, why am I being stopped?
You were driving suspicious, that's all you need to know.
Suspicious how? I'm under the limit.
I signaled, what's the
Step
violation?
out of the vehicle. Am I being detained or am I
This
free
isn't
to
a
go?
debate, step out, now.
Identify before you...
The red and blue lights exploded across the windshield without warning. Sir, turn the engine off. Hands on the steering wheel. Now. It was 9:42 p.m. on a quiet Wednesday night. The street was nearly empty, just a few parked cars, a flickering street lamp, and the low hum of traffic from the highway 2 blocks away. A light rain had started to fall, misting the air and leaving the asphalt dark and slick. Inside the car, the engine idled softly. The man behind the wheel did exactly what he was told. He turned off the ignition. Both hands moved slowly, deliberately resting at 10 and 2. Calm, controlled. Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped? The question was polite, neutral, almost clinical, but it landed wrong, because you were driving suspiciously. That's all you need to know right now? The officer stood just behind the driver's side window, one hand resting near his holster, the other gripping a flashlight that cut sharp white lines through the darkness of the car's interior. His posture was rigid, his jaw clenched. He leaned in slightly, invading the space. Suspicious how the man asked, I was driving under the speed limit. I used my signal. Is there a violation? The rain tapped lightly against the roof. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and then went quiet. The officer's flashlight paused on the man's face, then drifted down to his chest. His hands the center console. He did not answer the question. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, before I do that, am I being detained or am I free to go? That was the moment the temperature changed. The officer straightened up, his shoulders squared, his voice hardened. I asked you to step out of the vehicle. This isn't a debate. The man took a slow breath. You could see it in the slight rise of his chest, the measured pause before he spoke again. He wasn't afraid, but he was alert. This wasn't his first time navigating a moment like this. I'm happy to comply, he said evenly. I just want to understand the legal basis for the stop. The officer let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. You people always say the same thing. The words hung in the air longer than the rain. A car drove past slowly, its headlights briefly illuminating the scene. A porch light flicked on in a nearby house. Somewhere, a phone camera started recording from across the street, unnoticed by the officer, but not by the man in the car. Sir, last warning. Step out of the vehicle now or I will remove you. The man nodded once, not in submission but in acknowledgement. He reached for the door handle slowly, carefully, every movement deliberate. As he opened the door, the cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet pavement and metal. As he stepped out, he spoke again, his voice steady. For the record, my name is Daniel Carter, and I want it noted that I'm complying under protest. The officer didn't respond. He was already reaching for the handcuffs. At that moment, nothing about Daniel Carter's life, his profession, or the power of the law he represented mattered. On this dark, wet street, he was just another black man, labeled suspicious, standing under flashing lights about to be swallowed by a system that hadn't yet realized who it had just stopped. To understand how this stop spiraled so fast, you have to step away from the flashing lights and rewind the clock. Daniel Carter was not unfamiliar with law enforcement encounters. Not as a suspect, not as a defendant, but as the man sitting on the other side of the table, the one explaining constitutional limits to agents, supervisors, and sometimes even judges. Daniel was 44 years old. Born and raised in Baltimore, son of a public school teacher and a postal worker. His parents believed in rules, structure, and survival. They taught him early that the law was not just something that punished people. It was something that could protect them if you understood it well enough. He earned his undergraduate degree at Howard University, graduated top of his class. Law school followed at Georgetown. Student loans, late nights, clerkships that paid just enough to survive. He passed the bar on his first attempt and joined the Department of Justice as a junior attorney. Over the next 16 years, Daniel built a reputation quietly. Methodical, precise, unshakable under pressure. He specialized in constitutional compliance, advising federal agencies on use of force policies, lawful detentions, and civil rights exposure. He reviewed body camera footage frame by frame. He wrote memos that prevented lawsuits before they happened. He trained agents at Quantico. He stood in rooms full of armed professionals and explained calmly why the Fourth Amendment was not optional. He helped discipline agents who crossed lines. He defended others who were falsely accused. He believed accountability worked best when it was internal and honest. Eventually, the FBI recruited him as senior legal counsel. His job was not glamorous. No badge on TV, no gun. Just authority rooted in law. He was the person field offices called when things were about to go wrong, or after they already had. He had testified before congressional committees. He had helped draft national policy revisions after high-profile misconduct cases. He had saved careers by telling the truth early, and he had ended others by refusing to lie. That night, Daniel was driving home from a late meeting, a routine compliance review, the kind of work no one noticed unless it failed. He wore a dark suit jacket over a plain shirt. No insignia, no badge visible. Just another black man alone in a car on a quiet street after dark. Now rewind again to the other side of the stop. Officer Ryan Keller had been with the department for 9 years. Long enough to feel comfortable. Too long to feel questioned. He grew up in the same county, same schools, same neighborhoods he now patrolled. He believed he knew what belonged and what didn't. His personnel file told a familiar story. Adequate performance reviews. Strong officer safety instincts. Noted issues with tone. 3 civilian complaints over 6 years. All dismissed. Insufficient evidence. Conflicting accounts. No body camera footage available at the time. 2 supervisors had written nearly identical notes. Needs improvement in communication. Tends to escalate verbal encounters unnecessarily. Displays confidence bordering on rigidity. Keller did not see himself as biased. He saw himself as proactive. Alert. Street smart. He believed criminals didn't always look like criminals, but he also believed certain patterns repeated themselves. Certain neighborhoods. Certain behaviors. Certain people driving at certain hours. The night he stopped, Daniel Keller was coming off a 12-hour shift. Rain, fatigue, a slow night that felt like it needed something to justify it. When he saw Daniel's car slow slightly near an intersection, hesitate for half a second longer than Keller expected, that was enough. Suspicious behavior. That phrase covered everything and nothing at once. When Keller approached the vehicle, he did not see a federal attorney. He saw a challenge. A man who asked questions. A man who did not lower his eyes. A man who spoke carefully, precisely as if words mattered. That alone triggered something in Keller. In his experience, people who talked like that were hiding something, or thought they were smarter than him, or both. When Daniel asked about the legal basis for the stop, Keller heard defiance. When Daniel stayed calm, Keller heard disrespect. Each response Daniel gave made Keller feel less in control. And for Keller, control was the point. This was not about a traffic violation anymore, it was about authority. By the time Keller reached for his handcuffs, both men were standing at opposite ends of the same legal system. One had spent his life trying to keep it within the lines. The other believed the lines bent when he needed them to. Neither of them knew yet how expensive this misunderstanding was about to become. The rain picked up slightly as Daniel stood beside his car, the pavement reflecting the red and blue lights like broken glass. His jacket was already damp at the shoulders. The cold seeped through the fabric, but his posture stayed upright. Still. Intentional. Officer Keller circled him slowly, boots splashing through shallow puddles. The flashlight beam traced Daniel's outline again and again, lingering on his pockets, his hands the crease of his sleeves. "You nervous about something?" Keller asked. "No," Daniel replied. "I'm concerned about the legality of this stop." That answer landed like fuel on a fire. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Before Daniel moved, he spoke clearly, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Officer, I want to make it clear that I am not resisting. I am asking for clarification." Keller stepped closer. Too close. His voice dropped. "You don't get to control this situation." Daniel slowly turned around. His hands went behind his back, fingers interlaced. No sudden movements. Exactly the way he had taught agents to do it during training sessions. As Keller reached for his wrists, Daniel spoke again. "I am a federal employee. I work as legal counsel for the FBI. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. I can show you." Keller froze for half a second. Just long enough for doubt to flicker. Then it disappeared. "That doesn't mean anything to me. Anyone can say that. I can show you my identification. I didn't ask for it." The cuffs didn't go on yet. But Keller kept one hand gripping Daniel's wrist tighter than necessary. The metal felt cold against Daniel's skin. Across the street, a woman stepped closer to the curb, her phone held up at chest level. A man leaning against a pickup truck started recording too. Another car slowed, then stopped completely. "What's going on?" someone called out. "Routine stop." Keller snapped without turning around. Daniel raised his voice slightly. Calm, controlled. Officer, I am requesting that you verify my identity before escalating this further. This is being recorded. That word shifted the atmosphere. Recorded. Keller glanced around for the first time. He noticed the phones, the watching faces, the quiet attention of strangers who knew something wasn't right but didn't yet know why. You're interfering with my investigation, Keller said. There is no investigation, Daniel replied. There is no articulable suspicion of a crime. The word articulable hit hard. Keller's jaw tightened. He had heard that term before. In courtrooms. In training he barely paid attention to. You lawyers love big words, Keller said. Doesn't change the fact that you were acting suspicious. Suspicious, how Daniel asked. What specific behavior? Keller didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he pulled Daniel's arms back sharply and snapped one cuff on. The sound cut through the rain. Clean. Metallic. Final. The crowd reacted instantly. Hey, he didn't do anything. Why are you cuffing him? You don't need to do that. Phones moved closer. One woman stepped into the street for a better angle. Daniel felt the second cuff close around his wrist tighter this time. He winced just slightly, then steadied his breathing. For the record, Daniel said, his voice even, I am not resisting. I am complying under protest. I am FBI legal counsel. This stop is unlawful. Keller leaned in close to Daniel's ear. You should have thought about that before acting suspicious. Daniel said nothing more. There was no point. Everything that needed to be said was already on camera. As Keller guided him toward the patrol car, Daniel caught the eyes of one of the people recording. A silent exchange passed between them, a nod, an understanding. This mattered, because in moments like this, the truth doesn't come from authority. It comes from witnesses. The moment the second cuff clicked shut, time seemed to slow. The sound was sharp, metallic, unforgiving. It echoed louder than it should have, cutting through the rain, through the quiet street, through the low murmur of onlookers. Daniel felt the cold steel bite into his wrists as Keller pulled the cuffs tighter than necessary, testing resistance that never came. The pressure wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. Control asserted, authority performed. Daniel's shoulders tensed for a fraction of a second, then relaxed. He adjusted his balance, feet shoulder-width apart, exactly the posture he had demonstrated countless times in training rooms. Composure was not weakness. It was strategy. Keller guided him forward, one firm hand between Daniel's shoulder blades. Each step toward the patrol car felt deliberate, choreographed, as if the scene needed to look a certain way for the audience that had gathered. The back door of the cruiser opened with a hollow thud. Lower your head. Daniel bent slightly and slid onto the plastic seat. The surface was hard, cold, smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. The door closed. The lock engaged. Another sound added to the record. From outside, voices blurred together. This is messed up. He didn't do anything. Why won't you check his ID? Keller didn't respond. He walked around the car, slowly buying time, his boots splashing through puddles. When he finally climbed into the driver's seat, the rain streaked across the windshield, distorting the flashing lights into long red and blue smears. For a moment, neither man spoke. Inside the back seat, Daniel stared straight ahead. His reflection flickered in the partition glass. He could see his own eyes, steady focused. Beneath the calm, his mind was already working. Unlawful detention. No reasonable suspicion. Escalation without cause. Failure to verify identity. Excessive force in the application of restraints. He cataloged everything automatically. Training, habit, survival. In the front seat, Keller gripped the steering wheel. His jaw worked side to side. The energy he had fed on earlier began to drain, replaced by something quieter. Uncertainty. Not enough to stop, just enough to unsettle. The car pulled away from the curb. The drive to the station took 8 minutes. 8 long, silent minutes. Rain drummed against the roof. The wipers swept back and forth in a steady rhythm. Keller's radio crackled once, then went quiet again. Daniel shifted his wrist slightly, testing the cuffs. Too tight. Intentionally so. He made a mental note. Another detail. Another line item. This shouldn't be happening, Keller said suddenly, eyes fixed on the road. Daniel didn't answer. You could have just explained yourself better. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. I did, he said calmly, repeatedly. Keller said nothing after that. When they arrived at the station, the overhead lights washed the scene in stark white. The car stopped. The door opened. The rain had eased, leaving the air heavy and damp. Daniel stepped out carefully, guided once again by a hand that pressed harder than needed. Officers inside glanced up as they entered. Some curious, some indifferent, none yet aware of what was unfolding. As Daniel was led down the corridor, cuffed, composed, and silent, one truth hung over the moment. This was no longer just a stop. It was a record being created, one that would not fade, one that would follow everyone involved long after the rain dried and the lights were turned off. The processing room was quieter than Daniel expected. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A printer chirped somewhere behind a partition. An officer at a nearby desk glanced up, then looked back down, already losing interest. To them, this was routine. Another arrest, another name, another night. Daniel was guided to a metal chair and told to sit. The cuffs stayed on. A younger officer approached with a clipboard, eyes flicking briefly to Daniel's wrists, then to his face. Name, Daniel Carter. Date of birth. Daniel answered calmly, evenly, the way he had testified in courtrooms more times than he could count. As the officer typed, Daniel spoke again. Before this goes any further, I need you to know that I am federal legal counsel for the FBI. My credentials are in my jacket. I am requesting that a supervisor verify my identity immediately. The officer paused, just for a second. He looked toward Keller, who stood against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. He says he's FBI, the officer said. Keller scoffed. Anyone can say that. The officer hesitated, then reached into Daniel's jacket anyway. He pulled out a leather credential holder. Black. Worn at the edges. Heavy in his hand. He opened it. The room shifted. The gold seal caught the light. The photograph matched the man sitting in front of him. Name, title, office. Everything precise, everything unmistakably real. The officer's posture changed instantly. He looked at the credentials, then at Daniel, then back at the credentials. Keller, he said quietly. Keller pushed off the wall and walked over, irritation already on his face. He snatched the credentials and examined them longer this time. Too long. His eyes scanned every line, every number. His confidence began to drain, replaced by something tight and brittle. This doesn't make sense, Keller muttered. The officer stepped back. I'm getting a supervisor. Within moments, the room filled with a different energy. A watch commander entered, then another officer. Then silence. The supervisor took the credentials, didn't hesitate, and made a call. Short, direct. Yes, Daniel Carter, FBI Office of General Counsel, thank you. The call ended. The supervisor exhaled slowly and looked at Keller. You arrested FBI legal counsel. The words landed with weight. Keller's face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. His shoulders sagged just enough to be noticeable. For the first time that night, he looked small. The cuffs were removed immediately. The metal released Daniel's wrists with a dull click. Red marks circled his skin. He flexed his hands once slowly. I want everything documented, Daniel said. The stop, the reason for detention, the use of restraints, the refusal to verify my credentials. All body camera footage, all radio traffic. The supervisor nodded. Yes, sir. Daniel stood, straightened his jacket, looked directly at Keller. This didn't have to happen, he said quietly. Keller said nothing. He couldn't. Because in that moment, the power had shifted completely. The story Keller thought he was controlling had ended, and a new one had just begun. By the next morning, the stop was no longer just an internal problem. It was a record, and records have a way of surfacing. Daniel filed a formal complaint before sunrise. 12 pages, single-spaced, every detail documented. Timestamps, verbatim statements, names, badge numbers, policy violations cited line by line. He attached photographs of the marks on his wrists. He requested preservation of all video footage within a 2-block radius of the stop. By noon, the department's internal affairs unit opened an investigation. By evening, the first video appeared online. A shaky clip at first, then another angle, then body camera footage. The words suspicious behavior spread faster than the facts. View counts climbed by the thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Comments filled with anger, disbelief, and familiarity. I've been there. This could have been me. Why do they always say suspicious? Within 48 hours, national outlets picked up the story. A black man handcuffed during a routine traffic stop. FBI legal counsel detained without cause. Experts broke down the footage frame by frame. Former officers spoke. Civil rights attorneys explained exactly where the stop crossed into illegality. The department placed Officer Keller on administrative leave. That didn't slow the momentum. Internal affairs pulled Keller's history. Patterns emerged quickly. Stops disproportionately involving black drivers. Escalations during low-risk encounters. Complaints that never stuck, never quite met the threshold for discipline. Each one dismissed in isolation. Together, impossible to ignore. Daniel filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 2 weeks later. The complaint alleged unlawful detention, false arrest, violation of Fourth Amendment protections, and racial discrimination. It named Keller individually, and the city for failure to supervise and train. Exhibits included video stills, transcripts, policy manuals, and Keller's own incident report, which unraveled under scrutiny. Public pressure mounted. City council demanded answers. Community groups organized. The mayor issued a statement promising transparency. The police chief ordered a department-wide review of traffic stop data going back 5 years. When Internal Affairs concluded its investigation, the findings were clear. Keller had no articulable suspicion. He escalated without cause. He ignored offers to verify credentials. He applied restraints unnecessarily. His conduct violated department policy and constitutional standards. Officer Ryan Keller was terminated. The city moved quickly after that. Settlement negotiations began behind closed doors. No one argued the facts. The evidence was too clean, the videos too clear, the risk too high. The settlement was substantial, enough to make headlines, enough to hurt. But Daniel's focus had already shifted. As part of the agreement, the department committed to mandatory bias training, revised stop and detention protocols, and early warning systems for officers with escalating complaint patterns. Data audits would be public, body cameras mandatory, supervisor review automatic. For Keller, the consequences were permanent. His certification was revoked. Other departments declined to hire him. His name followed him. For the city, the cost went beyond money. Trust once lost is expensive to rebuild. For Daniel, justice was not the headline. It was the record, the change. The proof that documentation, when paired with truth, could still force accountability. Because this time the system hadn't just been exposed. It had been compelled to respond. What happened to Daniel Carter was not complicated. It was illegal. Under the Fourth Amendment, a traffic stop is a seizure. That seizure requires reasonable suspicion, specific articulable facts that a crime has occurred or is about to occur. Not a feeling, not a hunch, not a vague reference to suspicious behavior. In this case, there was none. Driving slowly, hesitating at an intersection, existing in a quiet neighborhood after dark. None of those meet the legal threshold. Courts have been clear about this for decades. When an officer cannot articulate the reason for a stop, the stop collapses under its own weight. The moment the officer escalated without cause, the violation deepened. Refusing to verify identity, ignoring lawful explanations, applying restraints without resistance. Each decision compounded the original error. By the time the handcuffs closed, the stop had crossed from questionable to unconstitutional. But the law alone does not explain why this happens so often. This is where bias enters. Implicit bias operates quietly. It does not announce itself as racism. It presents as intuition, as experience, as gut instinct. But when those instincts are shaped by stereotypes, they produce predictable outcomes. Certain people are seen as suspicious by default. Certain behaviors are interpreted as threats rather than explanations. Daniel spoke calmly. He asked informed questions. He did everything the law encourages. And that made the situation worse, not better, because his confidence challenged the officer's authority. That is not a coincidence. Studies repeatedly show that Black professionals who assert their rights are more likely to face escalation, not de-escalation. Competence is misread as defiance. Calm is misread as arrogance. Knowledge is misread as threat. So what should people do if they find themselves in a situation like this? First, stay physically calm. Sudden movements can be misinterpreted regardless of how unfair that is. Second, speak clearly and respectfully, even when the other party does not. Third, document everything if you can and encourage witnesses to do the same. Video does not lie and memory fades. Fourth, comply under protest. This is not surrender. It is strategy. Courts exist to evaluate legality. Streets do not. Fifth, seek legal counsel immediately. Do not explain your way out of a violation. Preserve evidence and let the process work. And finally, understand this. Knowing your rights does not guarantee protection, but it increases the chance of accountability later. Daniel Carter had legal knowledge, institutional backing, and access to resources. Most people do not. That is why these stories matter. Not because they are rare, but because they are common. Most just never reach the point where consequences are unavoidable. This case did not end because of luck. It ended because of documentation, witnesses, and a refusal to let the record disappear. The question now is simple. How many similar stops never make it this far? And what kind of system are we willing to tolerate until they do?